Now, let me tell you something. I've been around a lot of discussions in my life, and one topic that always gets people fired up is evolution. People have opinions, strong ones, scientists, teachers, philosophers, even everyday folks on social media. Everyone's got something to say about it. And when I started really looking at this, I realized something. Most folks are arguing without really understanding the bigger picture. They either see evolution as fact or as a story people use to explain life without God. And nobody stops to think deeply about what it really means. So I sat down and I looked at it. The theory says humans, animals, and plants gradually changed over millions of years through natural selection. Small adaptations here, survival of the fittest there, and over time, a completely different species emerges. Now, I ain't saying it's impossible. I'm just saying when you really start thinking about it, it raises some serious questions. How does something as complex as a human brain or the structure of a bird's wing just happen randomly? How does every intricate part of an eye or the way DNA functions evolve perfectly without some kind of direction? And here's what gets me. Evolution isn't just about the big picture, it's about the details. Tiny details that have to work together flawlessly. The heart pumping blood at just the right pressure, the lungs absorbing oxygen efficiently, enzymes doing their jobs perfectly, all systems that need to be coordinated. And the theory says somehow chance and selection got all of that right over millions of years. Now, when you hear it like that, it sounds simple on paper, but in reality, it's mind-blowing. Like, the odds are astronomical. I mean, I love a good chance in Vegas, but the odds of this just happening, you need a lifetime, no, several lifetimes to even wrap your mind around it. Then I thought about the fossil record. Now, evolution predicts that as species change, you'd find transitional fossils showing the gradual shifts. And yeah, we have some, but when you really examine them, a lot of gaps remain. Millions of years of supposed evolution, and yet whole lineages appear suddenly in the record fully formed. Not to mention, some creatures seem to have remained almost unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. And I'm sitting here thinking, if this is all just random, how do these systems stay so stable for so long? How do they survive environmental changes without breaking apart? And here's another layer that most people don't think about information. Every living thing carries information in DNA. That's the blueprint, the code that tells cells how to function, how to replicate, how to build a complex organism. Now, the theory of evolution assumes mutations happen and natural selection acts on them. But where does the information come from in the first place? That's not a small question. That's the big question. Because it's one thing to change a single feature over generations. It's a whole nother thing to create brand new information from nothing. And when you start asking that question, it leads to bigger discussions about purpose, design, and intelligence in life itself. So when I started really thinking about evolution, I realized it's not just a scientific theory, it's a philosophical question too. It challenges the way we see ourselves, where we come from, and how the world works. People get defensive when you bring this up, but I'm not here to argue. I'm here to explore, to react, to ask, what does this really mean for us, for our understanding of life, and for how we view the world around us? And honestly, when you look at it from all angles, complexity, information, fossils, adaptation, it's a lot more fascinating and a lot more complicated than most people give it credit for. Now let's dig a little deeper, because when you really start looking at the details of evolution, it's not just one simple story of survival of the fittest. There's adaptation, mutation, natural selection, all that stuff. And when you break it down, it's both fascinating and puzzling at the same time. Take the example of the peppered moth in England. Before the Industrial Revolution, most of these moths were light-colored, blending in with the trees. But as soot darkened the environment, darker moths became more common because they survived predators better. Sounds straightforward, right? Survival of the fittest in action. But here's the kicker. This change didn't create new information. It was just selecting from existing traits already in the population. Now, that's adaptation. But is adaptation the same as creating a brand new species? Not exactly. And that's where things start to get tricky. Then there's the incredible complexity of the human body. Look at the eye. I mean, really look at it. Tiny muscles adjust the lens. The retina detects light. Rods and cones handle color. Signals travel through the optic nerve to the brain, all happening in perfect coordination. Evolution says that all of this developed gradually, step by step, through random mutations. But when you pause and think about it, every single part had to function correctly for survival. A partially working eye wouldn't help you see. It could even hurt your chances of surviving. So each tiny change must somehow produce an advantage, not a disadvantage. That's a lot of pressure on random chance. And yet, here we are with perfectly functioning eyes. Amazing? Absolutely. But it raises a question. How do these incredibly complex systems come together without intentional design? And let's talk about DNA for a minute, because this is where it really blows your mind. DNA isn't just some random chemical, it's a code, a language, instructions that tell your cells exactly what to do. And every time a mutation occurs, it has the potential to change that code. Most mutations are neutral or harmful, but a tiny few may give an advantage. Evolution says over millions of years, these mutations can accumulate to create entirely new species. But here's the thing, the amount of information required to build something as complex as a human or a whale is staggering. Where does that information come from? How does random mutation generate fully functional systems without guidance? Scientists have been studying this for decades, and it's still one of the biggest questions in evolutionary biology. Then there's the fossil record. Now, textbooks like to show a neat chain of species evolving into one another, but when you look closely, it's not quite that smooth. There are big gaps. Whole lineages appear suddenly, and some creatures remain almost unchanged for millions of years. Horses, sharks, crocodiles, many of these have stayed remarkably similar over vast stretches of time. Evolution explains this as stasis or slow change, but it still makes you pause and wonder how so many perfectly adapted species could survive unchanged through enormous environmental shifts. It's not impossible, but it does challenge the idea of gradual, continuous change we usually imagine. And don't get me started on human intelligence and consciousness. The brain is the most complex organ in the known universe. Billions of neurons firing, forming memories, thoughts, emotions, creativity, self-awareness, all this emerging from random mutations and natural selection. That's what evolution says. But the leap from simple cells to consciousness is enormous. It's a massive gap, and science is still struggling to fully explain it. And if you're honest with yourself, it's one of the areas where the conversation about evolution and design really gets interesting, because there are layers of complexity that seem almost impossible to achieve by accident. Now, I'm not here to dismiss science. Far from it. Evolution explains a lot. Adaptation, survival, diversity, all of that is real, and it's been observed countless times. But when you step back and consider the big picture information, complexity, consciousness, gaps in the fossil record, you start to realize that the conversation is far bigger than just biology. It's philosophical. It's existential. It's about understanding life itself. And that, my friends, is what makes the debate so fascinating. When I look at evolution from all these angles, I start asking bigger questions. Is life just random? Is there design behind the complexity? Are we part of an accidental chain of events, or is there purpose woven into the very fabric of life? And honestly, asking these questions doesn't make you anti-science. It makes you thoughtful, reflective, and curious about the world we live in. All right, now we're getting into the part that really made me stop and think. Evolution isn't just some abstract concept you read about in a textbook. It's happening all around us every single day. Microorganisms adapt to antibiotics. Insects develop resistance to pesticides. Animals adjust to urban environments. These are real examples of evolution in action, and you can't deny them. They're fascinating, incredible even. But here's where it gets interesting. Adaptation is not the same thing as creating entirely new species or new information from scratch. It's working with what's already there. And that distinction matters when you start asking the bigger questions about life. Take bacteria, for example. Scientists have observed them evolving resistance to antibiotics over a few generations. That's survival of the fittest in real time. Pretty amazing, right? But the bacteria didn't suddenly invent a new cellular system or a new organ. They modified something that already existed. Now, that shows evolution at work, small adaptations for survival. But when you look at something like the human body or the complexity of ecosystems, the stakes are much higher. A tiny mutation in a single protein can make or break an organism. The probability that all these changes would align perfectly, consistently, and produce the incredibly complex systems we see today, it's staggering. That's where the questions start piling up. Then there's the natural world. Look at the hummingbird, tiny, fragile body, beating wings at hundreds of times per minute, perfectly adapted to hover and feed on nectar, or the cheetah built for speed, perfectly balanced muscles, designed for acceleration and control. Evolution says these creatures became this way gradually over millions of years. And yes, small changes can happen. Yes, natural selection can favor advantageous traits. But when you step back and look at the totality of what it takes for a hummingbird to survive and thrive, or a cheetah to dominate its environment, it's almost mind-blowing. Each component has to function exactly right. Fail at any point, and survival drops to zero. And somehow, evolution says, chance and selection did all that perfectly, repeatedly. That's a lot to process. Then you get into human intelligence. We're talking billions of neurons, trillions of connections, consciousness, self-awareness, creativity, morality. Evolutionary theory explains survival, adaptation, and reproduction, but consciousness, our ability to think abstractly, imagine the future, create art, solve complex problems, that's a leap from survival mechanics to something else entirely. Evolution provides part of the answer, but it doesn't fully account for the emergence of mind and self-awareness. And that's why philosophers, scientists, and thinkers have debated this for centuries. And don't forget about the fossil record. We talked about it before, but let's put it in perspective. You'd think if species evolved gradually over millions of years, the fossils would show smooth transition. But what we actually see is bursts of change, sudden appearances, and long periods of stasis where species remain almost unchanged. Horses, sharks, crocodiles, some have been around virtually the same for tens of millions of years. Evolutionary theory explains it as punctuated equilibrium or other mechanisms, but it still leaves you thinking, how did stability and sudden change balance so perfectly? The more I studied it, the more I realized that the story is a lot more complicated than the textbooks often make it sound. And here's the real kicker. When you step back and reflect, evolution touches on some of the biggest questions in life. How did we get here? Why are we alive? How did complex systems emerge? Is it all random, or is there a deeper intelligence behind life? Evolution gives a framework to start thinking about these questions scientifically, but it doesn't necessarily answer the existential part. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's not just science, it's philosophy, it's wonder, it's awe. So when I sit back and react to the theory of evolution, I don't just see a biological process. I see a conversation between chance and design, between survival and purpose, between the incredible complexity of life and the human desire to understand it. And folks, that conversation doesn't end with one book, one theory, or one opinion. It's ongoing, and it's something we should all explore with curiosity, humility, and an open mind. After looking at evolution from every angle, the science, the fossils, the complexity of life, the adaptation we see in nature, I started to realize something. This isn't just about biology. It's about understanding our place in the world. It's about asking questions that go beyond textbooks and experiments. It's about meaning, purpose, and the awe-inspiring complexity of life itself. Think about the human body for a second. Every part works together. Bones, muscles, organs, neurons, and blood vessels all coordinated perfectly. Evolution says this happened gradually, step by step. And I get that. But the bigger question is, how do these tiny incremental changes consistently produce such flawless systems? One misstep and it all falls apart. And yet, here we are, fully functional, thriving, thinking, creating. That's when you start to step back and say, wow, life is remarkable. It's almost impossible not to be amazed. And that amazement is what I want people to feel when they think about evolution. Now, I'm not dismissing what scientists have discovered. Adaptation, natural selection, survival of the fittest, all of that is real. We see it happening around us every day. Bacteria developing resistance, birds adjusting to urban environments, species surviving in extreme conditions. Evolution explains these phenomena, no doubt. But when we start talking about the emergence of entirely new species, complex systems, consciousness, and intelligence, the conversation deepens. It moves from science into philosophy, into metaphysics. It makes us question whether randomness alone can produce the sophistication we see in life, or whether there's something more guiding it. And here's what I find fascinating. The conversation about evolution isn't just academic. It shapes how we think about ourselves. It influences how we perceive life, morality, purpose, and responsibility. If life is purely random, then meaning is something we create for ourselves. If life has design or intelligence behind it, then our understanding of ethics, purpose, and destiny changes. Whether you believe in divine creation, intelligent design, or purely natural processes, the fact remains, life is incredible, complex, and worth exploring with curiosity. Take the example of the brain again. Billions of neurons, trillions of connections, processing thoughts, memories, and emotions. Evolution says this developed gradually. And yes, it's possible. But the more I reflect, the more I realize that there's something awe-inspiring in the mere possibility, consciousness itself, our ability to reflect, to plan, to imagine the future. That's not just survival, that's awareness. That's understanding that the world exists beyond immediate needs. And how that emerged from purely random processes, that's a question that will keep philosophers and scientists talking for generations. And then there's morality. We see humans capable of incredible kindness, creativity, and empathy. We see societies form, laws created, art, music, literature, all of these expressions of human thought and feeling. Evolution explains survival and adaptation. But what about values and ethics? Where do these arise from in a purely natural process? It's one thing to survive, it's another to create meaning, to seek justice, to love. And that's where the conversation becomes truly mind-expanding. So when I react to the theory of evolution, I don't see it as a debate to win or lose. I see it as a journey, a way to marvel at life, to ask questions, to explore the mysteries of existence. It challenges us, it humbles us, and it inspires us. And honestly, that's what makes it so powerful. You can look at it purely scientifically, or you can look at it philosophically, spiritually, even emotionally. And in every case, it leaves you in awe of life itself. At the end of the day, whether you fully buy into evolution, partially accept it, or question it from every angle, the reality is this: life is extraordinary. Complexity, adaptation, consciousness, morality, all of it points to something remarkable. And my advice, don't just accept one view. Explore it, question it, reflect on it, marvel at it. Because understanding life in all its depth and wonder is one of the most rewarding journeys you can take. And folks, That's what I want people to walk away with. Curiosity, awe, and respect for the incredible story of life, however it came to be.